Welcome to NVS Insight 2024. This session is Warehousing Unleashed, Mastering the Latest Release Features, presented by Kim Congleton. I am Kim Congleton. I am the co-owner and COO of NewView Strategies. I added this slide because I kind of feel like this is a good representation of what warehousing has felt like for the last 20 years inside of BC and NAV. I feel like, maybe the warehousing functionality was kind of old and tired, like the first truck, right? It's kind of the same thing over and over. And then, we're kind of getting a little rusty, a little behind the times in some of that functionality. I feel like the last couple of releases have added a little bit more and more exciting functionality in the warehouse area, more than what we've had before. I'm going to take a look at a couple of things that are new in this release. And then I'm also going to kind of recap what's happened over the last couple of releases, because I think combined together, they really are allowing us to do some things with our clients that we haven't had the opportunity to do before. I think there was, when you looked at functionality, what somebody was doing inside their warehouse, it really was either an all or nothing. It was hard to hit those people in that kind of middle area where they need a mix of basic warehousing and kind of a mix of the directed full-blown warehousing. So let's take a look at a couple of things. There's not a ton of stuff in this release, but there's kind of some nice enhancements to some of the stuff they've already done. One of them, and it's a small thing, but I really like this, especially from the perspective of creating Power BI reports, is this new feature under warehouse setup. It's a new toggle that you can turn on that will copy the item description to the warehouse entries. And this is kind of huge because it was a little frustrating. You're like building a Power BI report, you're looking at your data set, you're like, oh, I have everything in the warehouse entries I need except for the item description. And so now with this, it will actually write the item description to those lines. One of the things that you do want to make sure, though, that you do is that you go back and populate the old lines with descriptions as well. So then you just have to use that warehouse entry table as your data set. You don't have to kind of bring in some extra things. The other new feature is assigning lot and package number. So it's going to allow you to assign to existing lines package numbers. It's not going to overwrite. So it's kind of nice. You can kind of fill in some of those missing gaps. Not a huge change, but little tiny enhancements. The other thing that's kind of big, and I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this one because it depends on what you're trying to do in the warehouse. This one is the lot and serial number is now at the line level on documents. So picks, putaways, item journals. For item journals, it's kind of optional, but this does create some complexities. If you're dealing with lots, if you're in food or manufacturing and you've got lot and serial number requirements on those picks, for example, if you have unique lots that you need to break up that pick quantity by, it's really hard to do that manually. It's one of those things where you're going to need some sort of handheld device to do that. Let's take a look at a couple of the screens that affects. One of them is the item tracking lines. Here you can see on the item journal template for the item journal, there is a choice now when you go into the item journal and you go into your item journal batches to define them. You can, over to the far right there, you can see the item tracking lines, and you can toggle that on and off. And what that will do is you can actually enter the lot number on the line and not have to go into the item tracking lines and define it there. The next one that's really, really exciting, and I can't remember exactly what release this one came in. This one is huge. Nothing to handle has been the bane of my existence for the last 20 years, especially with directed pick and put away. This one can be super frustrating for users. It's probably the one that they call the most about, and you kind of just have to have a process for how you would go through and figure out what really was the issue. Now there's a screen where you can actually, it just kind of walks you through all the things that you would do manually to figure out what that error was. So you can see here sales order, you can see it created a pick, but you can also see in red, we have some issues with the quantities. And then over on the right, it kind of walks you through all of the different values that you would look at. Is it pickable? Is it in a pickable bin? Is it in the warehouse that I'm trying to create the sales order for? Is it already on a shipment? Is it already reserved? So all of those things, which is really, really nice. This one is probably one that will have the biggest impact on helping users solve their own problem. The other changes that are kind of exciting to me is that on the location card, there's a lot of changes relating to allowing you to use some of that functionality that before was only available in directed pick and put away and not really available to kind of some of those grayer areas where you're turning on, you have more than bin mandatory and you might just need like a put away template. Like I need a little bit of direction when I'm putting things away, but I'm not ready for everything to be turned on. So one of the things that you'll notice is that there's some of the functionality has been broken up that was under warehouse before. So now it's kind of broken up into areas. You'll notice the titles like purchase, sales, service, and transfer. So that functionality is related to that. But then you'll notice some new areas like down here under production where you can choose what level of warehouse handling you want to have. So even if I turn on require pick, I can go down and under production, if I don't want to require a pick for consumption or to consumption or from output, I can actually have no warehouse handling there. This is pretty helpful when their production and manufacturing process is not really set and they're easing their way into manufacturing. So they might not be ready to be that strict in having the system tell them what to bring to the production area. So this kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility. It allows you to kind of ease them into getting used to using the system and then going into a second phase where you actually start enforcing some of the better functionality that kind of puts some controls in place. The other thing, again, that's very exciting is that you can use now some of the settings under bin policy that were not available before as well. So like special equipment, if you require a forklift, go get something, or it will also check the warehouse class code. So you can also have some restrictions on where certain things go in the warehouse. So that's super helpful. The one I am excited about though is the put away bin policy, put away template. So now this is really exciting to me because I've had a lot of clients where they don't really need that much help on the picking and the shipping. That's kind of set, but it's really when things come in the door, they have some issues with trying to decide where things go. With that being their main problem, it gets kind of hard to have that discussion like, well, if you need directed put away, but you really don't need directed pick, we've got to turn it all on because that's the only way we're going to be able to use like the put away templates and really give you that direction. So that's where some of this comes into play and makes it a lot easier to say, well, now we can use that without having to turn everything on. Well, we already talked about this, but this kind of shows you, it's a good example on whether you want to pick or not pick. So you can see here our choices. So we can have no warehouse handling. Warehouse pick is optional, inventory pick movement. So really gives you some nice choices, and that's in the production area, the assembly area, or even under project now. So that allows us to be a lot more flexible in the processes that we design for people. This one as well is really a nice feature. I would like to see it for the shipment as well, but right now it's only on the receipt. So that over receiving code, I've used this a lot with a couple of customers. It's going to be available on documents like to put away the receipt, depending on what level of warehouse you have turned on, but it's going to allow you to say, if I ordered 100 pieces from my vendor and they send me 110 and I have an over receipt code that allows me to receive up to like 20% over or 30% over, I'm going to be able to receive that order, not have to go in and adjust quantities. The system will actually do that for me because I can put it in a field and then the functionality behind the scenes will go update that quantity, and there's nothing, there's no reason you don't have to go back and clean it up or do anything like that. And it's got minimal setup, so you can define your over receipt codes in a table. You can then assign them to an item or vendor. So there is kind of a little bit of hierarchy there. Obviously, if you assign it to the vendor, it's going to apply to any POs for that vendor. If it's assigned to the item, the vendor has, maybe you set a 10% on the vendor. but then there's one item that it's not real exact, especially depending on what type of product it is. It's common to have, oh, you're always going to get like anywhere between 10 to 20% shipped extra.
All right, everybody. Questions about our warehousing new release features? Was glad to see that somebody else was part of our joke about nothing left to handle.
Ah.
Truly, it's almost as bad as there is nothing to post.
Yeah, when you said that earlier, I was like, oh, that's the accountant's version of nothing to handle.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But you know what? We still get that there's nothing to post message in recurring journals, and it gets me every time because it's like I can't quite figure out what it is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it used to be that it was one of 4 things, so you'd have to know what that list of 4 things was in your head and troubleshoot them all.
Yep.
So
Well,
Microsoft
the
is doing
same,
a better
like
job.
nothing to handle was,
Yeah.
it could be a list of up to 10 to 12 things, depending on what all you have turned on.
Yep.
And yeah, I just used to have my checklist and it was just going down the list. But yeah, what they're starting to do is really starting to make a difference. One, there are some errors that I feel like now they have some error messages where before it would have said nothing to handle, but now there's an actual error message. But there, you still get the nothing to handle. That's still there.
Right.
But that one screen really helps.
Yeah, much better. All right. Any questions related to the warehousing functionality session?